Well, thank you all for being here today. I know we have a few more folks joining, but we just have some quick intros and some housekeeping type items. We'll also be recording this to have to share out on our YouTube later. But thank you for attending. We put this webinar series together so that we could further engage with our employer partners and share important labor market data with you all and just have information shared to you that we think is important, but we also want to know what you would like to know about and hear what's important. My name is Shannon Sheehy. If we haven't met before, I manage our careers team here at CodeU. You've probably engaged with Ali Rippey on our team, who is our manager of employer relationships. We also have some career coaches and technical project managers who work with students closer to the end of their CodeU experience. Today, though, we have Sarah Ehresman, who is a member of the KentuckianaWorks team. She's their Director of Labor Market Intelligence. Our team has worked closely with Sarah in the past to generate reports and get insights on what the tech industry is looking like in our regions outside of just what we are seeing and hearing kind of anecdotally. She's able to give us some of that hard data to back things up. So we asked her to be here today to share some of that information with you all. She's also happy to answer questions. Sarah is a wealth of knowledge, and we're really happy to have her here today. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Shannon. I appreciate the introduction. I'm going to pull up my slides here and hope that you can see them okay. Let's see. Okay, great. Well, thanks again for the opportunity to be here today on CodeU's Employer Webinar. I'm going to start with just a quick introduction about me and who I am. So I work at KentuckianaWorks, which is the workforce development board for the Louisville region. In addition to administering the CodeU program, we oversee a number of other programs aimed at connecting job seekers and employers. Another resource that we bring to the community is a shared understanding of what is happening in the local economy and issues facing workers. So in my role as Director of Labor Market Intelligence, I'm looking at that economic data and research, and I'm happy to be here today to be talking about the tech sector. So let's talk about the tech sector. So that by sector here, I'm meaning that we're going to talk about employment data based on the classification of what the employer does. So the primary thing the company does, regardless of your role in it. So one mythbuster here is that there is no consensus on what the definition of the tech sector is, right? You can be very broad in your definition. You can be quite narrow. One common way that researchers will look at defining what a tech sector might be is to look at industries that employ an above average share of STEM workers. This ends up including, industries in like architecture and engineering that you might not really consider tech. It also includes sort of a widespread of manufacturing companies, think not only computer hardware manufacturing, but semiconductor manufacturing. It can also kind of be difficult to get to some of the detailed industry data. So I've also seen headlines referring to the tech sector that just sort of grabs the information sector, which is going to include, a lot of more traditional publishing and broadcasting industries, things that you wouldn't necessarily consider high tech, but it does include most of the high tech. So anyways, point being here is that if you're reading headlines on the tech sector, it could be referring to a lot of different things. So it's good to kind of peel that back, see what they're actually talking about when they're referring to the tech sector. Are they really just kind of looking at a collection of specific companies? Are they actually looking at industry-wide data? Who are they including and what are they talking about is important to sort of get an understanding of. So today I'm going to talk about this tech sector using research again that looks at those industries that have an above average share of STEM workers, but then I've decided to narrow it down to those industries that are really in the software development, data and distribution space. So I'm not looking at any hardware development here, and I'm definitely not looking at chip manufacturing or semiconductor manufacturing or some of those other industries that many might consider high tech. So I'm going to take a pretty narrow view of tech here with these 7 industries: software publishers, media distribution services, telecommunications, data processing and web hosting, web search portals, computer systems design, so all those software development companies, and then research and development, which is where a lot of the AI firms are now. So these 7 industries are in professional services sector or the information sector. So I'm really only grabbing industries from those two places, and I'm not pulling all of the professional services, right? Because that would end up including accounting and architecture. Like I'm really just focused on computer systems design and R&D. So now that we've gotten some of the technical stuff out of the way, let's look at the data. So here, I just want to show you monthly employment in that tech sector that we discussed on the last slide since the year 2000. So you can see these gray bars here are indicating recessions. So a pretty substantial decline in tech sector employment after the 2001 recession, which often is referred to as the dot-com burst, right? We saw a little bit of decline also during the Great Recession, but really since the recovery from the '08 Great Recession, a very substantial increase in employment in the tech sector up until the COVID pandemic. So we had a 2-month recession during the COVID pandemic where employment fell during the tech sector, and then it increased rapidly right until the fourth quarter of 2022, where it has started to level off. But something I want to point out is that the decline here that we've seen since the fourth quarter of 2022 is a decline for sure, but it's not as steep of a decline as we saw after the dot-com bust. And it's still a higher level of employment nationally in the tech sector than has ever been recorded outside of that fourth quarter peak. This is the same tech sector data, but I wanted to bring in the local area. So the local area, we don't have the monthly frequency data. We only have it at the annual level, but I've indexed it to 2010. So we saw on the previous slide here that really employment growth in the tech sector, again, started steadily growing after 2010, after the fallout of the Great Recession. And so I've indexed to 2010 here to look at how employment has changed in the tech sector, both nationally and locally. So again, you can see in the blue line, the United States had strong, steady growth up till 22, where employment levels have started to decline. But honestly, the decline nationally looks a little bit more flat than, I mean, it is a decline, but it's a small decline. And it's still higher than any other time that we've recorded outside of 22, 23, right? The same story is not true locally. At the Kentuckiana data, you can see the decline in employment in the tech sector since 2022 has been faster locally than it has nationally, and the decline has been more substantial, where we're looking at employment levels now back that we saw in 2017. So we're really seeing employment levels have fallen off locally in the tech sector. Again, companies that do technology-related things. So what's going on with the tech sector? A paper from the United Nations kind of looked at what was going on with key drivers of the tech sector shift. They basically categorize it into 3 large buckets. The first one are economic shifts. So inflation and interest rates. So the Federal Reserve started increasing interest rates in 2022 to purposefully slow down the economy. This affects tech companies just as much as it affects the rest of the economy. Global uncertainty in terms of conflicts within Russia and in the Middle East also impact economic activity in the United States across the board. And then consumer spending patterns, which have changed pretty considerably since COVID, right? We saw a huge consumer spending patterns shift towards spending a lot of money in tech-related services. I know in 2020, I think I had literally every TV subscription service that you could possibly have. I'm down to 1, right? Like I've turned them all off because I don't watch TV as much as I used to anymore, right? And so those consumer spending patterns are affecting the tech industry as well. Another big bucket is, of course, technological change, AI and automation. This is a thing. It is not the only thing. I want to note is one of like 8 bullets that I have here, but it is an important factor impacting the tech sector. Sector maturity. So here I'm talking about like, if you think about the tech sector as really having a sort of startup mentality, really growing rapidly as we were sort of integrating computers and internets and all of the things that came with it, that was a different kind of model than they're at now. It used to be the case that tech companies would scoop up people, bright people, and they were like, we're going to grow. We will train them. We will, as long as they have some sort of like a base level knowledge, we are willing to bring them in and scoop them up because we know we're going to need more people. That is just not the case for that sector anymore. It's just at a more mature level. It doesn't have that startup mentality as it once did. Speculative bubbles are also a problem for the tech sector. Here I'm talking about Bitcoin and Dogecoin and these things that come up and then they pop and then you lose a lot of money. And so this is a factor impacting the tech sector as well. Business strategy changing too. So prioritizing profitability. So again, thinking less about growth models and more about return to shareholders often means fewer people on your payrolls. And then of course, overhiring during the pandemic was something we heard a lot about, and sort of just like a self-correction there in terms of what the industry is trying to do after having sort of maybe overhired during the pandemic. So all of these things are factors impacting the tech sector. I think that AI certainly is an important factor, but it is not the only factor. And I think it typically has become like a bit of a scapegoat to just say, like, that's the problem. But actually, there are a lot of things happening in the tech sector. And I just want to acknowledge that some of these things might sort themselves out sooner rather than later, right? Like interest rates are already starting to come back down, but that doesn't actually change the business strategies that some of these firms have chosen to adopt. I do want to talk about artificial intelligence for just a little bit, just because it is a hot topic. I sort of tend to subscribe to Roy Amara's philosophy, which is that we as humans tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. And so I think a lot of these headlines about AI coming to take all of our jobs in a very short amount of time are a little bit overdone. I'm not saying that AI isn't going to have an impact, but the rate at which and the volume at which it will have an impact, I think is a little bit overblown. Um, Here, I just want to show some interesting data that Brookings researchers used research from OpenAI. OpenAI put out a model where they said, what can ChatGPT potentially do uh, what are the things that ChatGPT can do to potentially reduce the workload of a particular position? And in what cases could 50% of that job potentially be done by AI? And if 50% of your job could potentially be done by AI, then we're going to call you a high risk exposure, highly exposed to AI. And at the top of this list are tech roles, computer and mathematical roles, are the ones that are doing the tasks that these large language models are well suited to do: writing, coding, analysis, legal drafting. But it's still it still remains to be seen the rate at which AI will be adopted. I mean, coders and software developers really did adopt it at mass scale, but then you have these clerical roles, who are also considered really highly exposed, but we haven't really seen the same level of adoption, right? And I think technology firms now are also still trying to figure out how and in what ways they will implement this technology that they've created. Another interesting report just came out from Anthropic that sort of looked at how Claude was being used, and it found, I think this is so interesting. It found that the responses from Claude matched the education level of the prompt that it was given, right? So if you are someone with a lot of expertise and you're writing a very highly sophisticated prompt, you get a sophisticated response. So it doesn't take a complex problem and suddenly make it simple. You really have to understand what you're doing when you're having a conversation with an AI bot to get the most success out of it. And so again, this support for augmentation, I think, goes a long way when you think about it. AI is most useful when it is used by someone with expertise, when they have a very specific prompt where they've clearly defined the goals and the constraints, and they're able to understand the output that is given back to them, right? I did another AI workshop and I gave this example, like if I have an electrical problem and I take a picture of it and I upload it to AI and I'm like, what's going on with this electrical problem? Can you help me fix it? It might give me a response, but I should not do that. I should not do whatever the response is about this electrical work because I will hurt myself, right? Like it requires someone who knows what they're doing, who has the understanding of circuits and what they're looking at to use the information that AI is given for it to actually be helpful. And I think that we're seeing that in other research, which would indicate that AI is actually not as good as we think it is. A new study from Workday found that, for every 10 hours that a person is potentially saving by using AI, 4 of those hours are redeployed fixing what AI did for it, right? So the results are not actually that good, and you're spending a considerable amount of time doing rework, going back and fixing the output that AI is given. So all of that to say, I think that there's a lot of support for augmentation. However, it is also true that AI is the next general purpose technology, and we have seen how general purpose technologies impact the field of work. They replace jobs through automation and substitution. They complement jobs through augmentation. They transform jobs through this replacement and complementary nature. And then they create entirely new professions. It's important to remember that before the year 2000, the Department of Labor did not recognize any computer occupations at all. They didn't exist before the year 2000, according to the Department of Labor. So we're going to see new jobs created as this new technology comes on board. But we are certainly in a tough transition period, and I don't want to deny that right now feels hard. But ultimately, I do think that these technologies will prove that the tech sector will recover. Projections are showing that employment in the tech sector is projected to turn around and start growing again. And Kentuckiana, it is projected to start growing, but honestly, it's not projected to get back to those employment levels that we saw in 2022. So that's sort of what the future holds. If I had a crystal ball, these are just sort of like understanding the idea that we're not going backwards. Our economy is only going to have more and more technology. So we're only going to need more and more of these companies and then these people with this expertise to make that happen. But I want to acknowledge that not all tech workers, the people who do technology related tasks, work in the tech sector, right? Just like not all nurses work in hospitals. Sometimes they work at insurance companies, right? And sometimes tech workers work in insurance companies. And so I want to talk about tech workers here. We're talking about people classified by what they do, regardless of what industry they find themselves employed in. Here I'm using the career clusters from advanced CTE. So we're going to capture roles in digital technology that cover data science and AI, networks, IT support, software solutions, and unmanned vehicle technology. Okay, so this is IT workers nationally. There are nearly 5.8 million tech workers in the US, accounting for 3.5% of employment. Here in purple, you can see software solutions make up the greatest percentage of those IT professionals, followed by support. Software developers are the largest type of type of job in the US tech workforce at this time. Here's the same chart, but for the Kentuckiana region, if you just kind of boop, 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 a couple things you can see pretty quickly. Software solutions are the biggest component in the local market, but it definitely makes up a smaller share locally than it does nationally. Software developers are the largest occupation locally, but just barely. IT support professionals are a very close second. If we go back to the national, you can see it's a different market nationally. So we do have a lot more IT support roles here. Management was the other thing I was going to point out. Sorry. There's a lot more management roles nationally as well, relative to what we see locally. This fun pie chart is really just to show you that IT workers are employed everywhere. I'm not sure what happened to my label there, but this light blue purple is finance and insurance. So anyways, the pie chart is to show you that tech workers are employed across all industries. But over half are employed in just 3 industries: the professional services industry, the finance and insurance industry, and the information sector. If we add in the public sector, that gets us close to about 2/3 of tech workers locally in one of those 4 industries. If we compare how tech workers are employed locally to what sectors they're employed in nationally, we see some pretty similar patterns. One being that the professional services sector employs the most IT workers, both nationally and locally, but there is a smaller percentage employed locally relative to the national level. On the other hand, in the finance and insurance sector, on the second line here, you can see much higher overrepresentation of tech workers employed locally in the finance and insurance sector relative to the US economy. This, of course, has to do with a very important insurance company headquartered here in the Louisville market. Down at the bottom, you can also see a couple of other sectors, healthcare and transportation. Even though they do employ a small share of tech workers, they are overrepresented locally in those 2 sectors, which again just have to do with the economic structure that we have here in the Louisville market. But I wanted to look at those top four industries that IT workers are employed in locally, and look at their employment level since 2010. So starting with finance and insurance, which again is an important sector for local tech workers, and looking at that employment change in the finance and insurance sector locally since 2010, we can see a pretty steep decline starting in about 2020, 2021, when Humana started to diminish its presence locally and started to really do a lot of remote hiring as well. We can also see employment in professional services sector has been kind of flat over the last couple of years. Public sector is really the only sector that we're seeing employment growth for those sectors that typically employ IT workers locally. So the future of the IT workforce, I think, just has to be flexible and resilient, embrace lifelong learning, embrace industry diversification, maybe think about what it means to become an expert in some healthcare terminology and then be like a healthcare tech worker or something like that. Soft skills and are going to be paramount, and being able to demonstrate them in real life networking events, I think will also be important. Because at the end of the day, again, our economy is going to have more technology, not less, as we move forward. And this chart is showing, projected demand by career cluster in the region. Roles in digital technology are expected to grow 9% over the next decade. This is triple the rate for all jobs in the region and second only behind healthcare. So even though, AI is reshaping these occupations and employers are dealing with, economic uncertainty, at the end of the day, we're still going to need workers skilled in data management and digital systems. And there's going to be continued demand for those positions. So, all right, that's it for me. Thank you. Here's my contact information. I'm always happy to take questions. I think maybe I saw some in the chat.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. That was really great. I know it gave me a lot to think about, and is kind of some things that we've been thinking about already. One question I had for you. So I know, like, talking to our students, we have people from really different backgrounds and they have like industry knowledge sometimes that helps them um, in the tech roles that they end up getting locally, whether it's in Louisville or in kind of our larger Kentucky region. What are some industries that you are seeing growth in, or what are some areas that people might want to look at? You mentioned, like, if you have a healthcare background, looking at like a healthcare company, not necessarily the tech sector, but do you have more examples of that?
I mean, healthcare is definitely the place where I would start. I think there's a lot to be said about how healthcare is going to use AI and technology in more creative and advanced ways. Radiology is a really great example of how they're using AI to read digital scans, but I can only imagine the amount of tech workers on the back end to make sure that bot is doing what it needs to be doing when the radiologist is working with it. So I think healthcare is a big space, and then advanced manufacturing. I mean, those are. I know advanced manufacturing too is manufacturing itself is struggling a little bit right now in these economic conditions, and so that's true too. But I think generally you can see all of the appliances and everything that we buy has more technology in it, not less. My car basically drives itself, right? Like, and there's going to be just a lot of technology workers that go in behind that development.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Our oven now tells us when it's preheated, which is great because we replaced it with an oven that did one beep and that was it. You were just left on your own to figure out what the temperature was. So that's been a pleasant turn of events there. Does anyone else have any questions for Sarah? Well, if you have any, feel free to still pipe up. I have just a couple of announcements and just some ways to further engage with the program. We do have a few events coming up. So we have our demo day next week, January 28th. That is a opportunity to see some presentations of projects from graduates from our most recent cohort that ended at the end of last month. So that's web dev and data projects. Our project managers are hosting a technology meetup next month on February 19th. They'll be sharing more information about that that we will send out to you all. We are hosting a virtual employer showcase on February 24th. So if you're interested in participating in that, you can reach out to Allie Rippey. Her email is just ALLI, Allie at CodeU.org. I'll have her information on the next screen. We're also planning to host a Louisville Tech Industry Night in person later this year, sometime in the spring, hopefully. Details fully TBD at this point, but kind of stay tuned if you're in the area. We would love to see you there. And then if you do have any ideas for upcoming webinars, feel free to let us know. We would love to keep going with this if there's anything you all would like to hear about. But otherwise, you can stay connected to us. I have my information up there as well as Allie's, and you are welcome to reach out. I just saw Chris, your comment, yeah, in the chat, and Sarah, thanks for responding to that. But if you all don't have anything else, we will let you go. Thanks so much again for attending.